record.
Devin
Awesome.
is new as well.
Devin, unmute and introduce yourself.
Hey guys, my name's Devin. I'm calling in from New Hope Foursquare in Salem, Oregon. If you know Marcus Rabb, who's not on today, he's
Yes. Yep.
a pastor, so I'm on for him.
Love that. That's awesome. Cool. Love it so much. All right. Thanks for being here. All right. Can you guys see that all good? Is that good? Great. We good? Awesome. As we do each and every time we're doing this, you guys, I'm going to talk a little bit this time, and we'll also open it up a little bit, and some of our grow guys will be in the chat. So if you're one of those people that's like, I don't really feel comfortable unmuting, that's fine. Just throw some stuff in the chat for today. You're going to get this deck when we're done. So at the conclusion of our call, sometime in the next 24 hours, you'll get this deck and the recording. So any of you that are watching right now that didn't make it at 11, hello. Thanks for watching us and all of that. And just so you guys know, as a reminder, we've been doing this call for, I think it's approaching 4 years, which kind of blows my mind. This call was birthed in the midst of COVID, and it started with about 4 church leaders saying, we don't know what the heck we're doing. Can we get on a call? Remember those days? And can we talk and figure it out? And so we did for about 45 minutes, and we said, we don't have anything next week since we're all staying at home. Can we do another call? And so we did. And then it just kind of became what it is. And so we appreciate you guys carving out the time, because recognizing that you guys all have stuff, and we're in that Easter season as well, which is going to be part of our conversation today. And so that, you saying, okay, I'm going to pause wherever I am around the country, and I'm going to talk about some crucial stuff is great. This is designed to sort of be a mixture of a little webinar and a little bit of a community group. So if you have things that you want to say or add or contribute, that'd be great. We'd love to do that. So here's what we're going to do today. That's the think tank thing. You guys know that it's creeping closer. We're working on some speakers actually that will be able to come out. So that registration will come out post Easter, but we put it on there every time, forgive me. But we really just love to see you guys, and we want to provide an environment that's great for you guys. So mark it down, block it, and plan on coming out to Vegas to be part of. Maybe you'll meet some of the folks. You haven't lived till you meet Caleb in person, so maybe you'll meet some of the folks that are famous from our call, and come out to Vegas and be part of that. Maybe Morgan and I will have coffee or something if he comes to Vegas. So there you go. All right. Here's what we want to talk about today. I want to do 2 things, and some of our guys are going to jump in as well, and if you have some thoughts, but we're going to do just a quick hit on Easter. Okay, just a quick hit on, hey, we got, what is it? 18. What's it say on the wall, Becker? 19 days? 18 days? 18 days till Easter, depending. Some of you guys start Easter on Friday or Saturday, so you've probably got less days. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to visit a conversation around planning. And what I want to say about that is, I recognize that some of you are directly related to planning, and some of you are not. But I think all of the content that we're going to talk about will be helpful in the sense of wherever you fit in your organization's process, as far as the planning of what you do on your weekends at whatever level that looks like. I think some of the things you're going to hear, I'm going to talk to Brian Becker a little bit about some of the stuff he's doing there, and then give you some practical stuff. Cool? Everyone nod. Cool. I'm willing to participation today, so just forgive me, you guys. Oh, Brandon. Wow. Okay, cool. By the way, Snod and Brandon, I made you co-hosts, so if you see people flying in that I don't admit, if you guys wouldn't mind kind of manning that participants box as well, that would be phenomenal, because I get in and I miss those. So thank you very much. Right, here's the Easter last call stuff. I have 2 slides, and I'm going to hear from you guys. Easter last 10%. So that's number 1. Obviously, we have less than 20 days. We use a term, when Dave used to work with me, who's on the call, we use this term a lot. We use this term at Growmentum a ton in a lot of different contexts. In this context, it's basically, what are the last 10% of things that with the limited amount of time you have, that potentially you could still address or go after as you prepare to welcome more people probably, we would hope, than you typically would have on a weekend. There was a couple Instagram reels that Jeff and I did a little bit in regards to this. So if you, they're just 2-minute long. You may want to go back and look at that if that's interesting to you. Number one would be this. I do want to say this to you guys. I just want you to I know you're putting tons of energy. I know you're leaning into your teams. I know some of you are like pumped. Some of you, Easter is a little bit like Valentine's Day for church leaders. What I mean by that is it has the pro and the con effect of, like, some of us are like, this is amazing, and there's going to be 10 gazillion people. And some of us are like, Easter is a marker for us. And if there's not 10 gazillion people, I'm going to lose my mind. So for some of us, there's that enthusiasm of, we kind of know there's going to be these people. And for some of us, we're kind of depending on those people showing up, whether that's an emotional energy we need, whether that's kind of maybe some of the darker places we are, or whatever. I just want to encourage you from now till then, if I can help you in any way, just to go, let's lower the energy and the expectation. If nothing else, here's what I need you to think. Some of you have done 20,000 Easters. Some of you are 2 decades into Easter. Some of you are in your first decade. Easter is so freaking important, and it isn't. I don't mean that from like a theological standpoint, by the way. I mean, it's so important in the life of a church. It's one of those big days. It's a day where we come together. But if you think back 5 years ago, most of you can't tell me anything about Easter 5 years ago at your church. You just can't. And so that's the tension I want you to reflect in and embrace some reasonable expectations and outcomes, right? Around when we showed you that influence spectrum a few times ago, where we talked about exposure, endearment, engagement, and evangelist. Not if you remember that. On the left side, we talked about exposure and endearment. You're going to have a lot of potential exposure and endearment as a percentage of your normal Sundays, hopefully on Easter. And so focus on that, right? Be prayerful around, if it's 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever it is, these folks that are going to come and show up, because ultimately we want them to be exposed to our church, but we're in this because we're called to expose them to something deeper in spiritual transformation that Christ can give them. So if nothing else, for that 2 minutes that I just said that, I just really prayerfully hope that you guys will embrace that. Lower the pressure on yourselves, right, as you address that. I say that in kind of a funny way because now I'm going to raise the pressure over the next 2 slides. So, but I just want you to give yourself permission to, like, chill out. Okay. So some of you are sitting there going, man, we don't have time to, do whatever, get the Easter bunny to come be at our photo booth or whatever. Let me give you something you can do in the next 2.5 weeks. It's basically the last 10%. And here's what I would encourage you. And if somebody wants to speak to this, go for it. Identify 5 or 10 core touch points today for your guest or your disconnected or people that typically come. What are the 5 or 10 touch points? A kid's check-in experience, a coffee experience, an interaction with a guest services usher, the parking experience. I don't know. I don't care what scale you are. I would just encourage you, this is what you still can do, is identify 5 to 10 of those core touch points and then scrub them. Even if you've got to call an all hands on deck meeting in the next week with your team and go, is there anything we can do in those particular areas, touch point areas, and it's incremental, that would add like a 10% elevation of that experience or that engagement for that individual? Is there anything we can do in those 5 or 10 touch points? Don't have to create anything new. Don't have to go get 40,000 bounce houses. Don't have to rent an Easter bunny costume. Is it the stuff you're already doing that you can elevate in a way that will have an incremental and reasonable effect on someone's experience when they come onto your campus? And I would say even maybe the online, depending on your online approach, there may be a 10% elevation you can do for that online experience specifically for Easter. Anybody want to speak to that? Or maybe you've already done it based on some of our conversations we've had. I'll give a second and then I'm going to move. Anybody? Maybe example where you've done that?
Okay, I'll speak really quickly just because we just had staff meeting. We're making a shift this year. We're using shuttles for the really expanded shuttle service for offsite parking. And so we just had a meeting with our team to talk about what that specific experience is for a person who's having to go through the inconvenience of parking offsite, you know, getting on the shuttle with their family, what all that experience is, dropping them off, and so trying to figure out that transition and utilize it well.
And what do we use? Because we have them undivided. I would imagine, Morgan, not to speak for you, but I would imagine some of the conversation is they're having an experience and there's an undivided attention that we have. What can we utilize in that moment to gain some ground? Fair? Morgan's like, yes, fair.
Yes, totally.
Yes. Anybody else
It's a
want to
great
jump
thing,
in?
Morgan.
Yeah,
Morgan, we did that a few years ago and had we had a shuttle host that just rode the shuttle and greeted people, telling them where Kids Men was, check in, things like that. It was really successful. So I love what you're thinking, man. That's all. Just want to affirm that.
Love it, Brandon. Again, we're not looking to reinvent things in the next 18 days, looking to just see what can we do that's still manageable. So it's going to look different on all of that stuff for you guys. Okay. So last 10%. Okay. Next slide. This is actually a slide from last year. Okay. So Lee cheated. Get over it. It's okay. Right. Because I went back to look at what we talked about and I think it's still very relevant. And so where we really can lean in still, and maybe this is part of your last 10%, is these engagement, these 4 reminders around engagement. Okay. So it kind of goes along with our conversations we've had around pathwaying, you know, where Chris Hall just wants to keep punching himself in the face, trying to figure out how to crack that code. And we all agree and have empathy for that. Number 1 is, by the way, Beard, these all start with C. I'm very excited right now, and I didn't even recognize it until I just threw it up there. So it must be from the Holy Spirit. Number 1 is make sure we have, as you think about, I muted you, as you think about clear engagement reminders for your teams, do you have anything that, are we clear around how we are going to encourage people to identify themselves? Okay. Keeping in mind that one of the things we advocate is that the step from showing up to identification is a massive trust step for people, right? When you go on a website, you put your name in, you hit send, submit your name, you know that there are consequences of you giving them your information. So when someone gives you their information, they are not dumb. Okay. You can quote me on that too, Beard. They are not dumb. They know that you're going to do something with it, and there's a trust thing. And so we should honor that. Agreed? And so clear, identifiable, go through, like challenge your team, go sit in your room and go, how are we going to get people to identify themselves? Is it simple? Is there a digital option? Is it confusing? What language are our hosts going to use when they stand on the stage, right? We've started to use the language where I serve of, very subtle, but we've said, hey, we're so glad you're here today. We say VIP because we're in Vegas, you know, hey, you're a VIP. We love that you're here. And then our hosts say these words. They say, we would love to give you an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to us. We would love to give you an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to us. That has been different wording in the last few months that we've used. And we adopted it because we feel like as churches, we can be very much, hey, we're glad you're here. Here's our stuff. Here's what we want you to do. Here's all that. And it's all comes from a good place. But what if even our posture changed from here we are to there you are? And we can do that subtly in the language that we communicate. And then think about, are there ways to incentivize people identifying themselves? Okay. Number 2, make sure that we go through, and this is the moment every time where we should have a concise follow-up strategy. And it should involve a 24, if not more than 48-hour contact, potentially to scale. I would encourage you guys to figure out how to make that personal. When I say personal, I don't mean go knock on the door and wait for them to open the door. I just mean something that doesn't feel like I'm getting a standard email and a standard text message. That's something that can't, I would hope it would be, but that would lean towards the personal. Don't forget digital elements. Can they get a quick video from you? If you're a church to scale that's dealing with 10 to 20 guests on Easter, I would really lean into how can we personalize the follow-up there. Okay. Number 4, make sure we have a compelling next step environment, that we've defined that. Most of you have. If you've been around forever, I know you have. We keep hammering on that. But that again would be a make sure that that compelling next step environment is not too far away, that it's accessible for them, and that it has very low expectation. If you want to talk offline, or you can talk in the chat to Brandon or Snod or Aaron around that, but low expectation, right? High social vibe is what we would encourage for that next step. In other words, it's tough. You can do it. Go for it. And maybe I'm wrong, but to stand up on Easter and go, hey, we got Rooted kicking off next week. It's 10 weeks. You get in a small group. You get to learn, tell your story, have a prayer day. That's your next step. I would question that strategy for someone who's finally come back and sitting in your seats on Easter. So I realize we're 18 days away, but at least think about how you would mold that. It could be as simple as Chris standing in the lobby next to the Easter bunny, greeting. It could be as simple as just positioning yourself, if that's what you can do at this later date, but make sure it's compelling. And then a comeback invite. This is rocket science. This isn't rocket science, but make sure that you are thinking about what's next, whether that's a series, which we know is not great at people coming back. I'm not convinced that people come back because all of a sudden you're going to talk about sexuality in the end times, but make sure that you are communicating. You guys are all like, yeah, that is what we're talking about. Make sure you are communicating whatever is coming next. One of the things that we've started to do, which I don't know, I don't have any way to measure, but we actually have started promoting the next big day. So like Mother's Day as the next big day might not be don't go crazy, but I'm saying it might be a subtle next invite to a day that someone who's disconnected might potentially show up again. So those are thoughts. I'm going to pause very briefly because I want to get to our next section. Anybody want to add anything there without getting too deep into like, here's what we do this, but want to give us maybe some helpful things you've learned? Please go. Love to hear it. Ready, set, go. Anybody?
Yeah, we do. One of the things we're doing is we're hosting an intro luncheon.
Who's this?
A couple weeks after
Introduce
Easter.
yourself. Who are you? Can't see
Oh,
you.
sure. Sorry. Okay. Video on, but maybe not.
There you go. Shane,
All right.
go
This
for it,
is
bud.
Shane. Yeah. So one of the things we're doing is we're hosting an intro luncheon, intro to ACC luncheon a couple of weeks after Easter, just to give people an opportunity to come learn a little bit more about the church. But I feel like it's just a low expectation and an easy invite, and we're offering lunch. So an easy comeback strategy for us.
Great. What do you got, Connor?
Yeah, one of the unique things we're trying to do this year, because spring break falls the week after Easter for our area, we're doing midweek touch points for families. So we've got like a play date at one of the like local kids areas where we're renting the place out and inviting families. So thinking through the idea of, man, families are looking to engage, but not necessarily sure if they want to engage in a church thing yet. So we've got a bowling night for upper elementary, a food court day for students. So we're trying to engage kind of every level of family, but midweek, while, hey, your kids are out of school this week post Easter, we want to engage with them. So hopefully get some hooks in the water throughout the week.
Love it, Connor. Somebody actually, what you just said reminded me of something that potentially some of you guys could still do. You probably can't do what Connor just said at this point, but it did remind me. There were a couple churches last year, and I thought it was creative. They actually promoted their summer VBS and on-site kids camps. So they had stuff coming up, and it's a long way off, but they knew that they were going to have families, and their demographic is like, what do you got for our kids? And we want, right? And so they, as part of Easter, actually, I think they even, if there was a charge or registration, they even gave like a discount or something like that. I thought that was a very interesting, again, it's a ways off, but like Becker, you do that Blitz thing or whatever, you're right. Like, could you take that, even though it's May or June, and go, hey, we want to invite you back this summer? Because a lot of parents are looking for that kind of thing, and they're willing to even pre-register their kids to be a part of something. So Connor, that's a great idea what you're doing, but thanks for teeing up that. Maybe that's reachable for a lot of you that are on the call, something that you could scramble and use as an invite. Anybody else? One last call and we got to move.
I'll just add real quickly, since you mentioned it, we're launching that on Easter. So
Love
Blitz
it.
signups for VBS. We have a big tent outside, information for all student ministries and kids for summer camps, and Blitz, which is a glorified VBS. But yeah.
Love it. Is it happening in the day and the evening, Becker? Sorry, too soon. Sorry.
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's my next meeting, Lisa. Hurry up.
Got it. All right, cool. I hope that's helpful, you guys. Great. That is our Easter kind of recap. When we get together next month, which will be post, we'll talk a little bit about it. Hopefully you guys will have some, we typically post Easter on our think tank call. We will spend a little bit more time kind of celebrating. Like, love to hear from some of you guys, maybe commiserating a little bit too, right? And that's okay as well in this community. So we'll do some of that. All right. I want to pivot us a little bit. It's not completely another thing, but I want us to move to our next topic, which is when we talk about church on mission, one of the things in our modeling, as far as what is a disciple, what does a fully engaged church on mission look like, is that element of gathering purposefully, right? And it is your weekends, we'll say, but it's your worship gathering. Some of you may have a Thursday night or something, but it is your time where you gather your church community. You gather, hopefully, those that are checking out your church community, and you actually gather together. So I've gotten a lot of kind of questions, and then Brian Becker and I were together earlier this week, and it came up a little bit. And so I thought this would be good. It's not Easter-ish, but as you guys move through Easter, a lot of you are involved at some level. Some of you are lead pastors and you're kind of driving weekends and what's happening in programming. Some of you are executive and maybe you're not exactly involved in that, or you have a team. I hope that the next 25 minutes will be helpful. I want to use some different tools to talk about it. But basically the topic is how do we make our weekend gatherings so intentional in a way that reflects your church's values, while also putting some principles in place that will help us plan and some effective processes that are there. Remember? And so we talk about influence daily. We define it through our Growmentum lens for the network that you guys are part of by being here. We very high level define it this way, that to gather purposefully is to embrace a normal rhythm of worship, inspiration, and motivation. Okay. That's worship. That's God's word. That's the preaching. That's all of that, while also emphasizing the mobilization of our church towards spiritual growth and next steps, which is the adverb. I got that right? The adverb purposefully. The reason it's there is we're gathering, and if I can say it in layman's terms, to both glorify God vertically, but also to mobilize the followers of Christ horizontally, to pursue him and to also impact their community. That it would be what we would define as a purposeful gathering. Right, that both of those, the vertical and the horizontal response, are actually happening. But in order for that to be true, there has to be some preemptiveness to us, right? There has to be some process, to whatever we're doing as we come together, right? And just to be clear, we do believe. Oh, I think I got it on here actually. We do believe that there has to be a why behind your weekend. So I was thinking about this, and I thought, here's kind of the deeper definition of what I just read to you. That no matter your context, and we'll talk about that in a second, no matter your style, this isn't about style. This isn't about any of that. You're not going to hear me. You're not going to hear us in the next 20 minutes go, you got to play these songs, or your music's got to be like this. You can be non-instrumental. I don't care. What we're talking about is there a purposefulness to the time where the bulk of your people are gathering, but also the people that are not there yet, right? So if our mission is some kind of helping people find and follow Jesus, that weekend gathering is going to play a big role. So we wanted to inspire, right? That our planning, we want to be inspirational, right? We want to breathe life into the atmosphere and environments of our worship experience. We want to be reflective. We want to reflect the character of God. We want to reflect what he wants to accomplish on that particular weekend. We want to be expressive. We want to create pathways for people to create space for God to move through. And we want to use all the senses, right? We want them to visually see things. We want them to hear things. We want them to We want them to verbalize things as much as possible. We want them to feel things. Maybe it's undefinable, but you know, when someone says, wow, I want to feel that. And we want to also create a uniform, a defined experience where people are mobilized as a result. So that's the why behind why we should be intentional around our programming. Cool, right? So I want to start here. Your values. You've heard us talk about this a lot. What you specifically value at your church is the secret sauce of your weekend planning and your programming. Okay. Hey, 1 second. Goodbye. Thank you. Hey, Dudley, come here. Actually, come here real quick. Come here. There's like 50 people here. Come here. Okay. Dudley Rutherford, pickleball player, also Shepherd Church, Porter Ranch, California.
Dudley Rutherford.
Oh, Brandon Beard's on there somewhere. But here they are. You're some guys are going, your Lee's call is completely getting hijacked.
Wow, look at this.
See, there you go. Don't say anything inappropriate.
I won't.
You got to go now.
All right.
All right.
Praying for you guys.
All right. Hey, that's
and
awesome.
girls and girls.
Yeah, we got ladies in the house. Thanks, Dudley. Unplanned interruption, but that's what Dudley does. So there you go. That's what I get for being with him when I'm doing the call. Right, Brandon? I should have known that was going to happen. So core values. What are your core values? Your unique identity and DNA. Your core values are an interpretive lens for your worship gatherings. They speak directly to your church's identity. So I would ask the question, you see it down here where my cursor is, does your weekend programming team have a firm grasp on your church values? Okay? Because, you know, some of those things that are value centric, if you say we're Jesus centric, that's one of our values, or we're come as you are is one of our values, or, you know, whatever that is, your programming on Sunday, what you do in your worship setting should be reflective of those core values. You also have to think about your core context, you know, the context that we're in. You ignore context to your own demise. So that's why our goal on here is not to talk about do this or do that. It's be aware of your context. Where Michelle is in Texas, right, Michelle? Where Michelle is in Texas, or where Greg, our rookie in Louisiana, is, completely different context than Vegas, California, Jeremy in New Hampshire, Jeremiah in Minnesota, on and on and on we could go. Pacific Northwest, Morgan. Everybody's context is a little bit different, okay? So that has to play into that combination of programming. I see Cowan nodding because he understands, like, when you're doing programming of services in different places, you can't, it's not all transferable. So if you try to be Vegas in rural Texas, probably not going to translate, right? It's just not. So how does that work? Cool. What is your core culture, right? What are the things that we have? How do you use your culture in a way that you cultivate through your services, that you actually cultivate culture, right? Example would be, we really want to be a worshipful culture. Well, if you want to be a worshipful culture, man, you got to lean into that time when the greatest amount of people are gathered to worship. Okay. If that's a value to you, then your programming needs to reflect that. I'll give you another example. If you're a culture that says, we want to be a culture that's reflective, we want to give people space to be silent, we want to give people to move away from the noise. Okay, cool. Well, if your programming is all 95 dB electric guitars and wailing basses and drums, but your culture is like, man, we'd really love to be reflective, your programming is not in alignment with the culture that you're trying to develop. The last thing would be, what is your core community? I think your programming in your weekends, and this applies to Easter, needs to reflect who's the people that primarily are coming new, who's the people that are primarily sitting in the seat, and who's the person that we're primarily thinking might potentially come. And sometimes those can be different. So you got to kind of figure out, what are we doing as long as how we put our weekend services together in order to actually, you know, I'll give you an example. When I first got to the Crossing 15 plus years ago, there was a huge push from some of our worship creatives to integrate, don't laugh at me, a lot of rap music into our worship environments. Okay. We're suburban Vegas. Okay. But the creative programming people were like, we need to integrate rap. And so we did it once. And I said to them afterwards, I said, guys, that was amazing. I said, I looked into the seats And I just want to be honest with you, like no one there understood what the heck was going on. And I value the multicultural aspect. That's not an anti-rap thing. It's just like you have to be aware of who's in your seats. So I would imagine Chris Hall doing rap in where he is, maybe, right? There it is. I just don't. So some of you actually have you are actually the filter for your worship programming crazies, and you have to be aware of continually remind them, here's who's in our seat. Now, is there some degree of who's our target that has to come to that conversation? Absolutely. Should you program worship, etc., in a way that is aware of who we would like to reach or who we are trying to reach? Absolutely. I just think you've got to take all of those factors into account when you think about your weekend planning. So I'm going to pause, and I hear some people talking. So Snod, give us some feedback on values before I turn to Becker.
One of the things is you're talking about core values. I think one thing that's a good reminder for all of us as Lee articulates, the question, what's our core values? I think the good reminder is our values are ultimately built on our mission. And then even beyond it being built on our mission, it's really the question that our values are a unique identifier. So as we go into Easter, if it's our unique identifier, it's okay to express those values on Sunday or enhance those values. And so as we're having the conversation of what's our core values or how are we enhancing those even or displaying those on Easter, I think the beautiful part is to understand that it's our unique identifier. We'll ultimately go back to the last slide that you had, Lee, and it begins to release that pressure because we could be who we are. And that's why people are choosing to drive to us and driving past other churches to choose to attend our church, wherever the church might be, because we get to be our expression of who God's called us to be. So I want us to think around the idea as he poses the question, core values. What is our unique identifier and how do we enhance that? Because I believe it's going to connect with people in the audience. So just a thought that went through my mind that I wanted to connect there.
Super great. Somebody else want to comment on this conversation? It's your moment. Awesome. So have a values conversation. Maybe too late. I love Snod's point. Maybe you're like the Easter programming has flown, but maybe not. And or it's applicable to the bigger picture as you move forward towards your 10-year vision of saying, how does our programming and gathering purposefully fit into it? Okay. I'm going to move to Becker, and I'm going to ask Brian, who's in Folsom, to speak to this a little bit. So I was with Brian, and he did something that I think is interesting, and I actually have not done this, but we will do this. And he basically, I'll tell Brian's story and then I'll shut up and let him talk. Brian has been at the church that he's at, has transitioned as the lead guy there in the last 6 or 7 months. It's a great church, great history, fantastic facilities just outside of Sacramento. And he is starting to integrate himself. So if anybody understands what following a long-term pastor, a lot of stuff that's there. And so I was able to sit with him in some of his meetings, and a couple of them had to do with programming. And as a part of that, he and I started having a conversation around what he calls core principles. And I was like, dude, this is gold. Like, I think I've known maybe what our principles were like internally, but I've never actually seen it documented. So he actually has a document, and I'll probably ask him if we can include that in the email. But Brian, why don't you talk a little bit? About somebody mute about those principles and what they mean to you, and then you can get into a little bit of the specifics on these 5 that are here, but maybe talk a little bit about the why behind it, would you?
Yeah, so it's actually originated when I planted a church 12 years ago. And we have to, if you're in the church planting world, you know that you have to create a proposal with lots of graphs and stats about how you're going to be successful and be self-sustaining in 3 years. And it's mostly BS, but you got to do it and you got to jump through the hoops. And some of it's good and some of it actually stands the test of time. And so when we were planting a church, I actually was influenced by Vince Antonucci, if anybody knows good old Vince from your part of town or your city, Lee. That's a story for another day, but he was a church planter as well. And so this is where this originated, and it's morphed over time. But what I realized is you can have values, church values that you just spoke of, Lee and Jeff. And that's so important. It's critical. It's built on the foundation of mission, all that. But principles kind of take it to that next level that is probably insider. It's not something that the church needs to know about. But if you are a target for your team in establishing culture, using whether it's phrases or single words, each one of these that you guys are looking at has a paragraph attached to it, so that as people join the team, as you are casting vision, and honestly, as people have been on the team and this has been in your file for 5 years, it's probably a good thing to pull it back out and do some self-evaluation on either what needs to change, because times do change, where mission doesn't change, but I think principles or how you communicate changes. So this is just something to keep close, at least it is for me. And so we don't need to go into all of these, but each one of these has a why behind it. So if it's the unfolding the arms principle, it's this idea that we seek to unfold the arms of a person who attends. And so we do that through different ways, primarily through engagement. We talk about humor, how humor is one of the easiest ways to unfold the arms of people. And so we're not a comedy show, and we're not here to do a stand-up, but we have a value or a principle. Our why is to unfold and engage the arms of the audience. And so one of the ways that we do that is through X, Y, and Z, and we state that. The invite for dinner, another way that you could say that is nothing cleans like company. Actually, Lee, I mean, let's not get too intimate here, but Lee was at my house. And you guys, my house looked better with Lee coming over than if Lee wasn't coming over. Why? Nothing cleans like company. So if you expect guests, it is an act of hospitality to be prepared and be ready. I tell this to my team all the time. I personally don't need the auditorium to look a certain way for me to belong here. I love the church. I love the people. It's not a game changer for me on what the auditorium looks like as far as my buy-in. I am the exception to the rule. I work here. I care more about this than anybody else. We don't have that liberty with somebody coming from the outside that is just trying to get a sense of who we are and who we prepared for. So we have this invite for dinner. When we invite people over, we do things differently than if people were not coming over for dinner. My kids have horrible manners when there is nobody over, and I hate it, but they just do. But if they come over, there's just a little bit higher expectation. Do you value, do you teach your team the idea that we do things differently because we actually expect guests to be with us? And so we operate differently. We don't fake it. We just actually care. So each one of these has a thing. Timbers Army is the MLS.
Yeah, talk about that one, Brian, real quick, because I just think that's unique.
Okay. Timbers Army, the idea, if you are into MLS at all, or
is that
even
soccer?
sports,
Is that soccer?
That is soccer, football Americana. But I lived my adult life in Portland, and the Timbers Army is a special part of the crowd. It's not just anybody who joins. Like Seahawks are 12s, like us fans, you're just a 12. But the Timbers Army is a particular type of fan, and they are jumping up and down. They're singing. They're doing their chants before the game even begins. It's not if we score, then we celebrate. It's this is who we are. So we celebrate regardless of the score, regardless of what point of the game it is. So you're creating a culture of expectation, a culture of setting the bar. That's what the Timbers Army does. So we don't get pumped if the room's full. We're just pumped. We don't wait for there to be a win to celebrate. we celebrate based off of our identity of who we are. And so that's got to be taught because we're just naturally respondent to wins. We get bummed when our team loses and we're excited when they win. Like I was bummed with the Kraken losing last night. Dang it.
Let's go.
It's stupid.
Go.
Yeah. So anyways, all these things, they're just things. You guys can all choose your own things. You all probably already do. But the point is that, you know, if you don't create a target, if you aim for nothing, you hit the target every time, whatever that saying is, helping your team get beyond values, which can be more ambiguous, to help define the target. And then you're making sure that people are on the same page. So a Bridgetown church in Portland, they're going to have different principles that they're trying to aim for than a Lakeside church in Folsom. And I love Bridgetown, but we are not Bridgetown. We would be a horrible Bridgetown. But if somebody thinks coming to Lakeside should be like Bridgetown, or someone's trying to make Lakeside Church Bridgetown because we haven't been specific with our principles, we will be at odds, even though our values might be the same and we're worshiping the same God. So this brings some alignment so you can pull on the same rope.
Dude, you got, when Brian was sharing this with me, and he didn't get into all of them, but I was like, this is amazing because again, and he probably said this, but I was trying to make sure Dudley doesn't barge in the door. The idea of like, these are specific to what kind of a weekend worship experience do we want to have, right? So it takes those core values and it really narrows it down. So when I was with Brian and he was sitting in the room, his team actually hasn't seen these yet. He hasn't rolled them out to them, but he's already setting that culture of like, here's what we want. So when we set in worship culture, here's what we want. How do we help people unfold their arms? The presence one he didn't even talk about, but it's like we want people to feel the presence even if they don't know what they're feeling, right? Like, man, I went there and something happened and I don't quite know how to define that. And so I would assume that Brian's going to build programming, worship, anything else they use, any artistic stuff they do will be built around, even preaching around those ideals. All right. Any questions for Brian before we get to our last thing? Brian, thank you, dude. That's so great. We're not done with Brian. Just anybody want to unmute and ask him clarifying or whatever around this, or how he went about finding these or creating them?
Brian, question.
Oh God.
Oh gosh, no. On the invite for dinner thing, you know, how do you train your staff and leaders to do that well in each of their environments without you walking around nitpicking every little thing that you don't like about, you know, pens are missing from the rack cards. This is dusty. That's dusty. Like, how have you found a system that worked well without you being, you know, the mom walking around the church all day long telling people what they're doing wrong?
Yeah, great question. I thought there was going to be massive mockery coming from Chris Hall.
I was ready for it.
That was like a normal question. I'm not prepared to answer.
So did I.
Yeah. He's my best friend, everybody. So there you go. I'll answer that two ways. One, I just had a meeting with our worship leader, creative arts guy, or incoming one, and I'm still new here. So we talked about the question of like, Brian, how much do you need to know versus how much do you not need to know? And because I'm new, but this still might be relevant, you know, obviously, Chris, you've been there for over a decade. What I told him was, until you know what I know, until you know how I think, until that target has been clearly defined, I'm going to be more involved than less involved. But that is not the ultimate goal because I am not going to be the mom. Nobody wants me to be the mom. And let's take moms out of the category here because, you know, but that's just that reality.
Sorry, ladies.
Of have you defined the target so that they know what to hit? Somewhere along the line, you have to say, this is unacceptable or this is the goal. It has to be communicated. Otherwise, people are trying to please you or please the vision. Even if it's not just pleasing the pastor, they just need to know the target. Second of all, so the second answer would be your leaders, your area leaders have to take ownership of that so that you don't. So if you haven't communicated that well, they're responsible. So whoever your connections pastor is, or whatever that role would be, or facilities, I was a church planner that set up and tore down chairs for 8 years. I love straight chairs. It is a passion of mine. So other people could care less. But if I haven't communicated that, then my facilities person won't know that that's super important, or won't know the why behind the what. Just like we arrange the tables when guests come over, we care. So somehow along the way, it's vision cast, and then somewhere along the way, there has to be a review or a self-evaluation. The way we do service evaluation now is we ask the person responsible to evaluate so that they can, for instance, like, how did the host moment go? We want the host to answer that question, not let me tell you how I think you did, Mr. Host. Because that gives them permission to be able to go, this didn't go well, I would do this differently. They get to make their own adjustments rather than people just feel like, here comes all the critique on what I did. So create culture, create feedback, create expectations, but don't be the person that's nitpicking.
Yeah,
Chris,
Becker,
Brian.
one of the
Yeah, go ahead.
one of the things I'll say on that too is, one, we, as preachers, as pastors, as leaders, we ask our congregation to look in the mirror rather than pick up the binoculars, right? It's like we've got to look at ourselves in the mirror, and we're encouraging this to the people sitting in the chairs. But and what I mean by that is the analogy, we've got to look at ourselves in the mirror instead of looking at other people with the binoculars. I think the same is true with what you're articulating, with the things around our building, the way that we lead, the decisions we make. But I think the thing that unlocks the power of what you're saying, and it's really that idea of the soccer analogy, teaching them to celebrate the right things, man, that's powerful. Because I think it really will unlock a lot of things around our churches when we know what to celebrate and when to celebrate. So that was just gold, Brian, just affirming that.
Brian, are you okay if I include that sheet in the email? Are you okay with that? I know your team's not even aware of it, but are you okay if it
Yeah,
goes
there's
out?
gonna be a paywall behind that, but no big deal. Just click the link and
it'll
give
go
us
to
your-
Chris Hall. It'll go to Chris Hall's Venmo.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, we just have a minute or two. So here's the thing. I'm going to go ahead and do this, even though I know some of you have to bail, because I'm just going to do it quickly. The reason is because I know if I don't do it, we won't get back to it for months, and it really fits with this topic. So you could say, yeah, don't do this part, but it's like at that point, like I don't know when we're going to do it again. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to throw this at you. You're going to get this deck, and maybe on social or something, we'll do some stuff around it. I'm glad Cowan's on here, because Cowan and I worked together for a long time, and he really was a key component in kind of developing this, what we call our 2-4-6 strategy. So we kind of went from weekend values to the principles Brian shared to like, here's the practical. Like, how do you actually get a meeting together with whatever encompasses your programming team? I have no idea your context. And so this is just a tool for you to use in your planning meetings. And I'm actually just going to read this. I'm sorry. Sense and scramble is not a strategy. What I mean by that is, I sense we should do this. Let's scramble around in 48 hours. That is not a strategy. That's chaos, and it should not happen very often, right? But being preemptive actually allows for pivots. So if you have a process or a plan, when you do get a last minute something, actually that's easier if you've done all the other stuff, right? If 95% of the stuff has been planned and you get that 5% idea, the reason your team won't freak is because they're not trying to just scramble anyway. Okay. So just be aware of that as we share this process with you. And then they should really, the last minute moments really should be like a return on the experience. Is this going to move the experience that well? You have to be the judge of that, for you to go say, hey, I need a bridge built on stage for Easter. I just came up with the idea 4 days ago in my study. Can you guys build a bridge? Like, okay, cool. But you need to know that should be the exception, not the rule. Okay. So here's the thing. I just sent this actually to a couple people this week. So we call it 2-4-6. It's actually a Google sheet that we will make available to you It will actually be on the it'll be on the email, shared thing, so you can copy it and make it your own. Don't use it because everyone will see it. But the sheet, I'm going to go forward. The sheet literally looks like this at the top. This is just a screenshot. But if you can picture 6 weeks of what you're seeing on your screen right now, that will give you a sense of what I'm going to send you. Okay. And you can take it, make it your own. But basically, it is each weekend at a glance. Okay. Everything that's important. So for us here at the Crossing, it's who's the communicator, who's worship, what series are we in? And then we have 3 elements that we, do we have a featured moment? We still do a lot of creative stuff. Do we have some kind of a bumper or video? And then any additional programming. And then we even include what's going to be talked about at our host moment, because sometimes those moments will impact what you do. For example, if you're going to have a host moment where you're going to introduce a mission partner, that might impact what you do creatively. So we include that on there. Basic principle is this, is you're going to sit in a meeting, you're going to put the sheets on the table or pull it up digitally, and you're going to say, in this hour, in this 90 minutes, we are going to talk about the next 6 Sundays, okay? But we're going to talk about them in priority order. Weeks 1 and 2 are what we call green. Those, we're going to talk about them, but we're scrubbing them for final details. We're going to talk about any challenges in the execution, because we know that green weeks, they are fully in execution mode, right? And we want to make them we want to make them compelling, and we want to create space for God to move. And so you're going to have, I don't know what your time is on that, but I would say 30% of your overall meeting time should be, are we good? Is this good? Do we have any questions? Anything need to happen? This is not, let's come up with ideas time, because we're only 2 weeks out, okay? Then we're going to go to weeks 3 and 4. This is all the same meeting. Let's talk about it. Where are we? These weeks 3 and 4, I would say, actually should receive the largest amount of focus and conversation, because they are typically in pre-execution mode, right? And the goal is to tighten up those ideas or thoughts and prepare to move them to green, okay? So do we like this? Are we good with this? I'm about to shoot this video. Do we think this interview is going to be right? This song we're going to introduce, blah, blah, blah. Weeks 5 and 6 are the weeks that are the furthest away, and you're going to be tempted to skip. But if you skip 5 and 6, the process is not going to be as effective for you. The reason they're red is because they are not in execution mode. They are in stop mode. So when we get to 5 and 6, it's probably 20% of the time. And it's basically like, what are we doing those weeks? Any ideas? Cool. This might be good. This might be good. It's like throwing stuff against the wall, right? They're wide, it's preliminary, but the goal is to capture any and all ideas and elements that might happen so that those things get on the page. Because, sorry to be obvious, if you are meeting on a weekly basis and you are running this 2-4-6 flow and you have principles like Becker talked about, and you're doing all of that, week 6 is going to be talked to. Each week that you actually have your gathering, in theory, will have had 5 to 6 conversations around that week before you actually execute at varying levels of intensity, right? Because week 6, a week from now, all you guys that are scholars on the call, is going to become week 5. And then it's going to move into yellow. Then it's going to move eventually into green. So if you will run this and you will be adamant about it, and you will get through the 6 weeks on a regular basis, even if 5 and 6 is just a 5 or 10 minute quick talk at the end, it's going to help you be so preemptive, and you're going to be so much happier with what you produce, where God can actually move in them. Okay. I know we could talk about this for 20 minutes. I apologize. Becker talked too long. So there's nothing I could do about it. All right. Talon, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just the basic concept is the more that you have the touches on it, it's kind of a circling approach rather than just, oh, we just need something creative for this thing. Yep. The more your team works through it, you'll be interested. It'll blow your mind how on week 5, one idea is completely morphed into something better by week 3. So that by week 2, you're starting to integrate and put that into practice. But if you're not doing the circling, if you're not doing the revisiting week after week, you might land on an idea, but it's probably not going to be the best idea or what it could have been. So that's the genius of 2-4-6.
Thank you. That's great. The circling
Mm.
versus just landing the idea, because a lot of us operate under, we've got a week. What do we want to do? Right. And we just grab the idea, or we're going to sing this song. And then it's like, we don't even have the margin. So it's all about ideas versus the circling. We're going to wrap up. I know you guys got to go, but on this page, let me just end here. I'm going to pray for our Easter stuff and we'll be done. Basically, this structured process will allow for the undisciplined, crazy, chaotic flow of ideas that birth the best moments. In other words, it'll allow you in week 4, 5, and 6 to kind of just be crazy, because it'll come together, to Dave's point, when you circle, right? A planning structure is only as effective as is intentional and consistent. Get consistent, be intentional. Trust me, this structure, if you run it, will not squash ideas. It will actually elevate new frontiers of ideas for your team, because it'll provide structure. Your creatives, even if they push back initially, your worship leader, they will become big fans right away of this process, because what they will produce will be substantially stronger over time because of the early conversations, and they will allow those ideas to incubate, develop, and grow. Okay. So you're going to get a link to that document. It is everyone's document. So if you want to use the document, you need to copy it. Otherwise, we're all going to see your planning and we're going to laugh and be mad at you. Okay. So don't do that. So you're going to get a link that then you can add to your own drive if it's helpful. If you want to reach out to myself, if you want to reach out to Cowan, I'm sure he would walk you through. He's walking through that on a regular basis as well. Let me do this. I know people are getting off, but let me just pray for us and then we'll be done. Okay. God, thank you for this group from all over the country, all walks of life, context, and ministry. God, we pray for March 30 and 31st, that weekend, that you would your spirit would be strong in the midst of our planning. Lord, as we say at Grow Minimum, help us to be aware of the strategy, but ultimately be led of your spirit. Pray you just bless this time of hard work, this time of lots of longer nights, lots of extra effort. God, we just ask that you would bless it in your name. Amen. That is all. We went a long way today. We should be proud.